Rain poured as flames consumed the wrecked Tesla, and two black teens pulled an unconscious man from the smoke, seconds before the car exploded behind them. They didn't know who he was. They just knew someone needed saving. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The night swallowed everything. The streets of Detroit were slick with oil and water, glowing in fractured neon beneath the orange haze of flickering streetlights. Elijah's hoodie clung to him like a second skin, soaked through and dripping from every seam. Trey's sneakers squished with each step, their soles barely gripping the cracked pavement. The boys were exhausted, bone-deep tired from a double shift spent flipping patties and scrubbing grease from stubborn steel, but their laughter still echoed faintly between warehouse walls. That laughter vanished in an instant. The crash tore through the alley's silence like a bomb. Glass exploded, metal screamed. In the same heartbeat, instinct overtook thought. Elijah didn't stop to ask questions. His legs just moved, carrying him faster than his mind could follow. Trey was right behind him, breath sharp, eyes wide, heart pounding in his throat. The car had folded inward like a crushed soda can. Steam hissed from the hood as sparks danced across the shattered asphalt. Inside, behind an airbag streaked with blood, a man's head lolled against the window, his chest barely rising. His leg was caught beneath a twisted column of metal, crushed into the floorboard. He didn't respond to Trey's pounding on the window. "Help me get him out!" Trey shouted, already prying at the door with a rusted tire iron from a nearby trash pile. The metal groaned, but didn't give. Elijah didn't argue. "I'll get something," he shouted over his shoulder, vanishing into the storm. At the gas station, Elijah shoved through the door and grabbed the extinguisher from its wall mount without waiting for permission. The clerk behind the counter screamed something, but Elijah was gone again, sprinting, the extinguisher heavy in his arms, rain slicing down like knives. By the time he returned, flames had begun to crawl from beneath the Tesla's frame. Trey's jacket was wrapped around his hands as he wrestled with the warped door, his shoulders shaking with the effort. Elijah doused the fire without hesitation, foam coating the pavement in thick white blankets. Trey gave one last heave, and the door cracked open. They dragged the man out just as the vehicle's undercarriage erupted in flame, a muffled whump echoing through the alley like a warning. They dropped to the ground, shielding his body with their own, the heat washing over them in waves. None of them spoke. Not yet. Not while adrenaline still roared in their ears like thunder. And none of them, especially not the boys, had any idea whose life they had just saved. The fluorescent hum of the hospital hallway was cold and indifferent, like the building itself had no interest in heroes. Elijah sat stiff in a plastic chair, hands still stained with black soot and the faint metallic scent of fire suppressant. Trey leaned forward, elbows on knees, foot tapping nervously against the scuffed linoleum. Neither had changed clothes since the rescue. Their hoodies were streaked with ash, their sneakers still damp, soles leaving faint, grimy prints on the floor. A nurse finally emerged, clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. "He's awake. He asked to see you, but just for a moment." They rose instantly, adrenaline rushing back through them like a second wind. Maybe this was it. The moment. Gratitude. Maybe a handshake. Maybe something more. Recognition. Validation. Anything. The room was bright but silent, save for the steady beep of monitors. Richard Langston sat upright in the hospital bed, IV lines running into his arm, his chest bandaged, a long scratch trailing from his jaw down to his collarbone. His eyes were a stormy blue, cold and scanning, not resting on the boys for longer than a breath. His assistant, a woman in her late 40s with horn-rimmed glasses and a tight bun, stood beside him, expression unreadable. Langston's gaze lingered on Elijah's shirt, then Trey's battered sneakers, then flicked away. "You're the ones from the accident," he said flatly, more a statement than acknowledgement. "Yes, sir," Trey replied, voice uncertain, searching for some crack in the man's demeanor, some sliver of gratitude. Langston nodded slowly. "We'll need to ensure this doesn't go public." He didn't say, "Thank you," didn't ask their names. His attention had already drifted back to the IV pole as he added, almost lazily, "Handle it," to his assistant. The silence that followed was deafening. An orderly appeared as if summoned by cue. "Gentlemen, this way." Outside, as they approached the glass exit doors, a man in a black wool coat intercepted them. He looked like someone pulled from a boardroom or a courtroom. Sharp suit, colder eyes. He held out 2 white envelopes. "Mr. Langston values his privacy. No press, no contact, no further communication. These are for your time." Inside the envelopes, each found a prepaid Visa card. $200, no note, no explanation. Elijah stared at his, lips tightening. Trey let out a breath that was part laugh, part disbelief. "You'd think we tripped him, not saved his life." They stepped outside into the rain again, this time with something heavier than water soaking through their skin. The sun had barely risen when Elijah and Trey walked into Mel's Burger Shack, shoulders hunched against the morning chill, uniforms damp from the dew clinging to the seats of Trey's old bike. The place still smelled like fryer grease and burned toast, but it was familiar, safe, the kind of routine that gave structure to everything else. They were early, as usual. Trey flipped on the lights in the back. Elijah clocked in. Their boss, Gary, came out from the office with the kind of expression that made both boys stop mid-step. He didn't look angry, just worn down, eyes red-rimmed, lips pressed into a line. He held a folded piece of paper in his trembling hand. "Can I talk to you both for a second?" he said, already turning toward the walk-in. Inside, the hum of the refrigeration unit filled the silence. Gary didn't look at them. He stared at the metal wall like it might offer an easier conversation. "I'm sorry, boys," he mumbled. "I've got to let you go." "What?" Trey stepped forward. "Gary, we've never been late. We worked overtime last week when Mario called out. It's not about performance." His voice was sharper now, but it shook at the edges. He held up the paper. "We got a letter from a law firm, Langston's people. They said if we continue to allow you to represent the business, it could be interpreted as unauthorized endorsement, conflict of interest. That's the phrase they used. I don't even know what the hell that means." Elijah felt his stomach drop. The air pulled out of his lungs like someone had punched him in the chest. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly. "I know," Gary whispered, "but I can't afford to fight a billionaire." They stood there in silence, the only sound the hum of the cooler. Trey nodded slowly, jaw clenched so tight it trembled. Elijah couldn't speak. That afternoon, as Elijah sat on the porch steps at home, phone in hand, his mom stormed out of the house. "My line just got shut off, again," she snapped. But the anger faded as quickly as it came. She stared at the screen. "Wait, no. The bill says it's already paid?" Elijah's eyes narrowed. He grabbed the phone, scrolling through. "Payment received, anonymous, account cleared." He stood there, staring at the screen, realization slowly carving itself into his spine. This wasn't hush money. It was cleanup. Langston wasn't thanking them. He was deleting them. The betrayal sank in slowly, like poison in the bloodstream. At first, Trey tried to shrug it off, saying maybe it was all just a legal misunderstanding. Elijah didn't buy it. Not after the prepaid cards, not after getting fired, not after his mom's phone bill was mysteriously erased like a criminal record. Langston hadn't ignored them. He'd targeted them. The difference twisted something inside both of them, something that wouldn't lie still. That night, Trey sat on the floor of his bedroom, hoodie up, headphones on, sifting through his camera roll. The footage wasn't dramatic, just shaky glimpses of flashing lights, wet pavement, the contorted frame of a burning car. His GoPro had been clipped to his backpack, something he wore by force of habit, documenting city life, street stories, fragments for his channel, under the block light. But one clip changed everything. It was a 5-second flash, Trey's breathless voice calling out, "Get the extinguisher!" and Elijah sprinting into the storm. The angle caught Langston's face, briefly, bloodied and unconscious, pinned inside the Tesla. There was no mistaking it now. They edited the clip with a caption so stark it cut like glass. "We saved a man's life. Then we were fired." They uploaded it at midnight. No press, no tags, no sponsors, just the truth. By 6 a.m., Trey's phone was on fire. The views doubled every hour. By noon, 4.2 million. Twitter exploded. Instagram Reels ripped it into viral sound bites. TikTok spun it into edits layered with protest music. People weren't just watching, they were raging. Justice for Elijah. And Trey hashed Langston exposed. In comment sections, strangers poured out their own stories, of being punished for speaking up, of being erased for not fitting the image. Some had worked in Langston's companies. Others had been silenced. Now the internet was screaming for accountability. By afternoon, a producer from the Daily Truth called. They wanted Trey and Elijah on the show. "You're not just a story," the woman said. "You're the story." In the studio, under the soft hum of lights and the steady gaze of journalist Ava Green, Elijah sat in a borrowed shirt 2 sizes too big and told the world, "We didn't want money. We didn't want fame. We just wanted to be seen, just to not be erased." The room was still after that. Ava nodded, and the camera kept rolling. Across the country, people leaned closer to their screens, not to witness tragedy, but to finally hear 2 boys who had refused to stay silent. Silence can be deafening, but in Langston's case it was damning. While the world watched, waiting for an apology or at least a perfunctory press release, the Langston group stayed quiet, as if hoping the storm would pass on its own. But storms don't pass when they've already struck. They spread. Within hours of Trey and Elijah's interview, digital sleuths, activists, watchdog journalists, armchair investigators dug in. It started with a Reddit thread titled, "Anyone else notice this isn't the first time Langston's been in the news for this?" From there, it unraveled like thread in a flame. Archived court documents surfaced, revealing multiple settlements paid out by Langston's firms under strict non-disclosure agreements. Former employees anonymously described a culture of fear and retaliation, where dissent was punished not with pink slips, but with silence bought in 6-figure hush money. There were whispers of blacklisted careers, tampered records, pressure campaigns. One woman claimed her contract had been rewritten after she spoke up about harassment. Another said she was offered a company apartment in exchange for her silence after being wrongfully terminated. But it wasn't until the leak that the damage turned irreversible. A whistleblower inside Langston's legal department forwarded an internal email chain to a watchdog journalist. It was real, verifiable, dated 3 days after the boy's video had gone viral. The assistant's words were razor sharp. "We need to make sure these boys disappear from the narrative. Control the optics. Clean it up. I don't care what it costs." Attached was a list of digital takedown requests, paid social media suppressions, and a PR contract labeled Mitigation Strategy, Social Disruption. The document hit the internet like a grenade. Every news cycle led with it. Forbes, The Washington Sentinel, even tech blogs joined in, exposing Langston's social media manipulation ties to content moderation firms. Within 48 hours, 2 institutional investors, Vanguard Global and Halcyon Holdings, publicly pulled their funding from Langston's capital fund, citing ethical misalignment. Brand partners dropped sponsorships. A university rescinded an honorary doctorate. The Department of Labor announced a formal investigation into workplace retaliation and civil rights violations. And somewhere in Detroit, two teens who had once been invisible were now being called symbols, heroes. Proof that truth doesn't just cut through power, it shatters it. The house Langston built looked like steel and stone, but under scrutiny, it cracked like glass. The conference hall glowed with golden light, rows of crystal fixtures catching the soft stage spotlights as they hung like stars from the vaulted ceiling. It was a space built for prestige, suits, handshakes, ribbon cuttings. But tonight, the applause wasn't for a politician or a celebrity. It was for a teenage boy from the east side of Detroit. Elijah Brooks stood alone at the podium, his blazer just a touch too big, shoulders squared with the weight of everything he now carried. The silence before his voice rang out was not empty. It was reverent. "The cost of courage," he began, his voice steady but low. "We thought being brave meant running into a burning car. And maybe that was brave. But we learned that real courage shows up later, when the cameras turn off and the powerful start rewriting the story." He looked up, eyes sweeping across an audience of educators, activists, students, and leaders. "We weren't supposed to be remembered. We were supposed to disappear, fired, forgotten, rewritten. But we chose to stay loud, not out of anger, out of truth." The room was still as stone, the silence punctuated only by the occasional shift of someone leaning forward, not wanting to miss a word. Elijah's hand, resting on the podium edge, clenched once, then relaxed. When people like Richard Langston decide whose stories get erased, they're not just protecting their names, they're betting the world won't care, that the world is too distracted to notice. But this time, he exhaled. This time, the world did. The audience rose as one, not out of politeness, but from the undeniable sense that they were witnessing something that would outlast applause. Meanwhile, Trey sat in the back row, camera on his lap, watching the moment with quiet pride. His short film, Buried Alive by Billions, had just premiered at the Liberty Documentary Festival. Shot in grainy black and white with fragments of raw phone footage, voiceovers, and the original rescue clip, the film ended on a single screen of white text. "You can erase files, but you can't erase the truth." Critics called it haunting. Students called it gospel. As for Langston, he stepped down from his empire citing stress and unwarranted attention. He disappeared behind closed doors and shuttered blinds. But no one believed the statement, because now the truth had a voice, and that voice belonged to two boys who refused to be erased.